Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our seminar, which, as it says on the tin, is about gamification and behaviour change. What we want to talk to you about today is how, if you combine these two things, you can really achieve transformation within your organisations. There's a small caveat to that, though, not maybe quite so small. If it's done well, you can get those changes. If it's done with an understanding of how human behavior and motivation actually works, then you can achieve that transformational change. If it's done badly, it can have the opposite effect. So not only will you have spent a hell of a lot of money, you won't have achieved your results, but worse of all, you might have actually got an even more disengaged workforce. But hopefully, we're going to tell you some of the ways that we've achieved results in some of the programs that we've worked in. So, who are we? My name's Nuri Sazan, and I've been working in the change management advisory side for about the last 15 years, and within learning itself for the last 6 years. I'm joined today by my colleague James, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, so I'm James. I'm an instructional designer at Saffron, and I'm an unashamed behavioural economics enthusiast. So I'm really excited to share some of these ideas with you today.
So we know that the pace of change today, the digital world, the fourth revolution, the only thing that's constant is that change. And it's you, as L&D professionals, that are tasked with having to manage that change. We are, as businesses get disrupted with new technologies, with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, and it's all around us, we know that. It's changing our workforces, not just as consumers, but as people and the way that they're actually working. Our attention spans are shorter. So, at the same time, you're having to make your people change to respond to the business requirements and the business strategy. And I suspect that some of you feel that once you've got through one change program, you're immediately starting on another. And I can see some of you nodding your heads there, and I really do sympathize. I think you have a really tough job. And it's no wonder, really, because to actually achieve a behavior change or a habit formation, for a really simple thing like drinking a glass of water at lunchtime, on average, that takes 66 days for that to become a habit. And that vertical there is about how long it takes for you not to have the conscious effort of drinking that glass of water. It's about when does it become automatic for you. So something as small as having a glass of water every day takes 66 days. Something with a little bit more effort takes 254 days. 50 sit-ups a day, it's not asking you a huge change in the way that you're doing things. That takes up to 254 days for you to change your habit. And you guys are being asked to change your people in probably shorter time scales. Is it impossible? Should we all just go home now? Or hopefully not.
So today we want to talk with you about behavioural economics. So what is behavioural economics? Well, firstly, to understand how important it is, you really need to understand how it relates to traditional economics. So traditional economics makes a lot of assumptions about how humans behave. It assumes that we're rational agents and that when we make decisions, we have all the pertinent information so we can accurately weigh the costs and benefits of all the options we have in front of us. And this means that when we make decisions, they're always in our best interests. And the problem is that on the basis of these assumptions, economists draw far-reaching conclusions about how to design our lives. They have enormous influence over how our tax systems, our education systems, our healthcare systems operate. But how many of us actually do this? When we're making decisions, how many of us actually do a cost-benefit analysis of everything? The truth is that none of us do. It's simply not how we're wired. It's not how the brain has evolved to function. There are huge ways in which we deviate from this idealized economic model. So behavioral economics was really developed as a reaction to this, and its central claim is that the ways in which we deviate from this traditional view of human decision-making can be identified and specified. It's revealed that the errors we make are not only common, but predictable and systematic. So this is great news for us. It means that we can take all this knowledge and use it to help humans make better decisions. But it also means that if we're not logical, rational agents, that means we must be irrational. And this idea that we're irrational is really quite uncomfortable the first time you hear it, because we like to feel that we're in a driving seat, that we have full control over our lives and the decisions we make. But that has more to do with how we want to see ourselves than with reality. In market research, nobody will ever tell you that they went into a wine store and bought a French wine because French music was playing at the time of purchase, or that they bought a German wine because German music was playing at the same time. But there are reliable studies to show that this is true. So for any of you who might still be on the fence, who think, no, I'm logical, every decision I make is based on logic and not on instinct, well, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment, so stick with us on this one. Watch the following clip and decide what you think he's saying.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
So what was he saying? Bar? Yeah,
Yeah.
so it sounded like he was saying bar. So we'll play you a next clip. Focus on what he's saying now.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
So what was he saying then?
Yeah.
Bar. So it sounded like he was making a var or a far sound. Well, I'm going to tell you that the audio didn't actually change. Only the picture did. So this time we're going to play it again, and halfway through, close your eyes.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
So in this next clip, you get to see both images side by side, and you can look from one end to the other.
Ba.
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
Ba.
Now to the left of the screen.
Ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
So this illusion is called the McGurk effect, and it's quite amazing in a number of ways. One of them is that no matter how many times you watch it, you still fall for the illusion. Even though you know that the sound doesn't change, only the picture does, there's no way of your brain to compute that. After watching it, you can't say, now I see reality as it really is. This is impossible to overcome. So what this experiment tells us is that by the time we digest information, it's not really a true reflection of reality. But humans are pretty good at vision. A large part of our brain is dedicated to vision, and we spend a lot of hours of the day using our vision. So if we make predictable mistakes in vision, then surely we're making mistakes in areas that we're not so good at, such as saving money, avoiding procrastination. And this turns out to be true. Just as we're susceptible to visual illusions, we're also susceptible to cognitive illusions. And behavioral economics is basically the study of these cognitive illusions. It's the analysis of the true forces that influence our decisions in day-to-day life. And what we can do with all this knowledge is take it and harness those forces and improve our ability to make decisions. So now we're going to show you an example from a business using behavioral economics. So businesses are using behavioral economic insights more and more, especially in the advertising and marketing industries. But we wanted to show you how Uber are using it. So Uber are taking behavioral economics really seriously. They've even gone as far as hiring a behavioral economist from UCLA to head up a research unit. And one of the areas they needed to find out about how people are making decisions was around surge pricing, because Uber's customers get really angry when it comes to surge pricing. And what they found in their research was another example of humans behaving irrationally. So they found that people are more likely to take a ride when the surge multiplier is at 2.1 than when it's at 2.0. So for some reason, people are more willing to spend more money. So why is this? Well, in behavioral economics, there's an insight called the round number effect. So when the price is at 2.0, we think that this is somehow unfair and capricious, because it seems like someone's just made it up. The taxi driver's seen that it's raining, he's pressed the button on his phone, and he's trying to rip us off. On the other hand, when the price multiplier is at 2.1, people don't have this same instinct. They think that there must be some sort of complex algorithm behind it, determining the price, and this sense of unfairness dissipates. So the same holds true when you go onto the other side of 2.0. They've seen that when you go from 1.9 to 2.0, they see a 6 times larger drop-off in demand than when the price goes from 1.8 to 1.9. Again, completely irrational, it's the same difference.
So we've seen how businesses are actually using behavioural insights to increase revenue. And what we want to talk to you about is how you can use these behavioural insights in learning, combined with good gamification, to actually accelerate that habit formation. Because that's what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to cut that time it takes for people to change their behaviour. But what is good gamification? Well, it's not about leaderboards and trophies necessarily. Good gamification is in fact all around us. If you look at social media and you look at Instagram, Facebook, etc., you hardly notice that this is actually gamification. But every time a user goes in, posts something, and they get a like, that's a little bit of motivation for them. There's a little bit of dopamine effect, a feel-good factor. And that makes them go in again and keep having a look at their notifications, messages, etc., and more likes. That kind of addictive behavior is very much like gaming. And it's that kind of behavior that you want to try and get from your learning.
So we wanted to talk to you about another subtle, non-overt form of gamification on a service that you've probably all used. So in behavioral economics, there's a concept called the endowed progress effect. It's a phenomenon that increases motivation as people feel they're nearing a goal. So on LinkedIn, when you start a new profile, every new user starts with some semblance of progress and are encouraged to improve their profile. And again, they do this by adding more information. So cleverly, LinkedIn's completion bar jumpstarts the perception of progress and doesn't include a numeric scale. The effect of this on a new user is that they feel that a proper LinkedIn profile isn't that far away, and this massively increases the likelihood of them completing the onboarding process. So another way that gamification in L&D, as it's currently used, fails is that people have a far too narrow view of reward. So in Dan Pink's book Drive, he tells us that how research into motivation has shown that traditional carrot stick, if-then rewards can actually undermine intrinsic motivation, diminish performance, and diminish enjoyment by encouraging short-term thinking. To be able to design effective gamification that achieves the desired behavioral outcomes, you really require a holistic understanding of cognitive behavior. You need to understand what makes people tick. You need to understand the motivations and drivers. Doing gamification well is really quite complex. Game mechanics can be incredibly effective, but only if they scratch the user's itch. If it doesn't do this, no amount of gamification will spur engagement. Rewards must fit with the narrative of why the learner is taking a course and align with their internal triggers and motivations. So now we wanted to show you some of the ways in which we're implementing this more effective type of gamification. So firstly, we wanted to tell you about a concept in behavioral economics called the motivating uncertainty effect. So this insight shows that we're more motivated to reach a goal if there's an uncertain reward, and people are more likely to work harder and enjoy the process more. So we recently developed a security awareness course with William Hill. So I'll play you a demo of this. So this is the first interaction the learner does. They're talking to a colleague, and they have to make decisions, and then here, they're scored based on that. But that score comes as a bit of a surprise. They don't know they're going to get it. So similar to the LinkedIn example we showed you earlier, we've again used the endowed progress effect by giving the learner 8 points for the first scored interaction. So again, this jumpstarts that perception of progress and instantly makes the learner more motivated towards achieving the end goal. So as I mentioned earlier, in this, we use this concept of uncertain rewards because if the rewards become predictable, we no longer want them. So in this one, we also use what we call hot triggers. So these are like the notifications on your phone that get you addicted to constantly check your phone. And we use this, and that meant that when there's this uncertainty of what the learner can unlock as they answer questions, it creates this intrigue needed to pull the learner deeper into the learning experience. And also, injecting this sense of unpredictability into the learning experience has benefits for retention and recall. The more surprising an experience is, the more likely you are to recall it. And this is because we're constantly generating expectations of what's likely to happen next. When that doesn't happen, it sends a big signal to our brain to pay attention.
Got time to do.
So now Nora is going to tell you a bit more about another effect in behavioral economics.
There's two behavioural insights that are called the IKEA effect. How many of you ever shopped in IKEA? Okay. So you'll know that when you go to IKEA, you can actually never get to the place that you want to get to immediately. What they actually ask you to do is go round the whole shop. And the outcome of that is that because you've spent some effort in actually doing that, you never walk out of IKEA without buying something. Whether it's from the marketplace, and it might be £2 or whatever, but you rarely walk out of IKEA without buying something. So we didn't use that particular behavioural insight, but we did use another. And that's called, it's basically about ownership. And what that is that we place a very disproportionate value on something that we have built ourselves. We value that because we've had blood, sweat and tears into that product. And anyone who's built any flat pack furniture will know what I mean by that. And so similarly, you can use that effect in learning. So for a groundbreaking course for Transport for London, and this is some time back in 2011 that we built for Transport for London, the first thing that a learner had to do was actually create their own learning path by completing a diagnostic. And that personalisation, that fact that they had actually made that path for themselves through the learning based on their perceptions and their answers, meant that they could then find their own, what was actually relevant to them. And that made it much more personal to them. Secondly, as part of that course and following that same theme, they had a plan for how they were going to manage their mental resilience. But it was up to them to choose what elements of advice they wanted to take away and form as a development plan. And there was encouragement to share those plans with other people that were like-minded. So what's the result of that? The result of that was that in an organization where there were cuts, where mental resilience itself is a taboo subject, we surveyed people a year later, and the effects of that was that mental resilience, or days off sick due to mental health issues, had gone down by 1 day per worker. This was a non-mandatory course, so people had to take it voluntarily. Over 1,000 people took that course in the first year, whereas when it was only a face-to-face course, there were less than 100 people that took the course. The course went viral because it actually allowed people to tell their colleagues about the techniques that they were actually using. And what's really surprising, and this is about the habit formation that we were talking about earlier, is that 67% of the people that took the course a year before were still applying the techniques in their day-to-day roles a year later. So for Transport for London, just in that first year of rollout for a non-mandatory course, that saved them close to £8 million. And that's just based on fixed costs of salary. Doesn't even include any of the other costs in relation to closing down stations because there aren't enough people there to look after the passengers. So this was back in 2011. Since then, we've used these particular behaviours, the Noble Edge Effect, for a course for Michelin that we did in 2015. So Michelin has, the tyre manufacturer, the little fat man with the tyres all the way around it. It's a well-known image. And that brand is actually worth billions. And it's an intangible asset for Michelin. They actually value it and put it on their balance sheet. But just like sellotape and Hoover, if it becomes common parlance, if that brand actually loses its value because people aren't using it properly, it would have wiped billions off the balance sheet, and they wouldn't have actually been able to value it. So we had to convince salespeople to forego commission. This is their own self-interest. We had to tell them to forego commission in order to save the brand, in order to save it from becoming Hoover. And what we did was use the Noble Edge Effect. This is about instilling the values of a brand, because people actually respect and honor a brand if they can align their values with it. The Michelin brand was about safety, trust, protection of society and its customers. And when you actually then align the values of the salespeople towards those same values, you actually get quite a swell. You can actually make people lose their own personal gain and take up the values of the company. Because we also played a game where we showed that they were the owners of the brand because they're the frontline staff protecting it, we used what's called the endowment effect, which is the same as the IKEA effect. They were guardians of this. They owned it. They were accountable for it. And then lastly, they're salespeople, so they're out in the field the whole time. But bringing them together had all of the skeptics that hadn't bought into it at that point in time, those people that don't necessarily buy into it. When you bring everyone together and they're at the same level and they actually follow what everyone else does. And we put them into a game that actually made them follow each other in terms of their particular bias towards this strategy. And what were the results of that? In 2015, when other tyre manufacturers' brand value was going down, you can see that the results of this program achieved phenomenal results. And that's an independent valuation, not even by the big four auditing companies, but by an independent brand valuation specialist. And of that $500 million increase in brand value, again, the auditors, the independent valuers, said that 100 million of that value was actually attributable to the learning experience that we put together. So this means that you all can achieve the same kind of results if you apply this kind of learning in your learning design and this kind of behavioral insight into your learning design.
So the brain really is quite a complex thing. And the way we can utilize what we already know about it from behavioral economics are numerous. We didn't have time to go into it in this particular seminar, but if you'd like to find out more about how we're applying these insights into our platform work, you can come speak to us over at our stand, which is directly behind you. It's the big orange one. But before that, we did want to leave you with a few key takeaways. So the first one is that you need to understand that we're all irrational, but predictably so. You need to understand that when you're devising gamification, trying to implement it, to be effective, it needs to tap into people's intrinsic motivations. When you're trying to do gamification, you need to start with a desired behavioral outcome and then gamify. You can't just slap on points, leaderboards, badges. It simply won't work. And you also need to know how you're going to measure this change and test them against behavioral objectives. And the final point we wanted to leave you with is you can start doing this now. You can start applying these behavioral insights at a pretty low cost. And to give you some ideas of how you can do this, we've got a reading list here of some fascinating books into behavioral design and also behavioral economics more generally.